I think we could call this episode How Far I've Come. Yes, how far I've come. I was on a Zoom call the other day in a group, and a friend of mine, actually, I was not on a Zoom call. He invited me to speak to his group. He wanted me to speak, teach, and inspire to his group. And so he said, hey, he wanted to just call and catch up and have a conversation beforehand. And so he's seen my 3-year journey, my 4-year journey from, just when COVID started to having no podcasting experience, no equipment, nothing, to now he's seen me with my full kit, and we were reflecting on how far I've come. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about that on this episode. Hopefully it will provide encouragement for you to keep pressing on as well.
You know when someone is selling from stage and at the end the audience gets up and rushes to the back of the room to buy? That's a table rush. My name is Mischa Z, and the Table Rush Talk Show is all about bringing you the tools, strategies, and tactics that you can use to grow your audience and inspire them to buy.
Yeah, so my buddy Jeff, Jeff was a friend of mine in San Diego here in Encinitas, California, and he has since moved back to Chicago. But he was in Chicago, and he leads. He's the secretary of a group, and he brings speakers into the group to educate and teach and inspire and all this kind of stuff. And it's like hold on, please. Sorry, I hit a button and the recording window went away, so I was like, what happened? But anyway, it's sorry, I'm hedging. It's a spiritual group, and I get an opportunity to share my experience, strength, and hope. But anyway, he's seen me lead meetings, speak at meetings on and off over the last 3 or 4 years, and it's all been online, specifically because of COVID, right? Pushing so many groups online. And so he called me up. He's like, hey, let's catch up. Let's have a call and talk about spiritual things and where we are in life and all this kind of stuff. And, he'd been uprooted and moved his wife and him and his 2 young kids, maybe 3 young kids, I've lost track now, back to Chicago, getting them in school, all these sorts of things. But then, of course, so we were catching up on that and how that was going for him and how he's trying to hold space and be patient, tolerant, and loving to, his wife, his kids, and be understanding and be encouraging. And his wife is now working out of Chicago instead of California. Kids, as I said, new schools, and so they moved back into their old house, and I guess it'd been a number of years since they'd been there to their old house in Chicago, and there was lots of triggers there and lots of things that were different and things that were where they were 10 years ago are no longer there now. So those little things can stress you out. And so he was really just talking about how, how to be patient, loving, tolerant, how to encourage and be supportive, and go through what else, a little melancholy, like the arc of life, change, all these sorts of things. And it was great for me to hear, because all that stuff applies to the business world. All these lessons of family, patience, love, and tolerance apply to who I work with. my customers who I pay, stuff like that. But anyway, then it shifted over to me. And thank you for listening to that. It shifted over to me. And he was like, I had totally forgotten this. And he reminded me. He said, 3 years ago, you didn't have a podcast mic. 3 years ago, you had none of this equipment, none of these lights, none of this capacity to speak like you do on a Zoom call, to have a podcast, all this stuff. And I had totally forgotten that 3 years ago, a podcast was just an idea. Like, it had been in the back of my head for a good 2 or 3 years, but I had never gotten around to it. I'd had excuse after excuse why not to do it, and whatever. I believe my first episodes were Thanksgiving 2020. I literally started my podcast in the heat of COVID, Thanksgiving 2020. And of course, it's now 600 and some podcast episodes later, 100 interviews later. I've been a guest speaker on podcasts. I've got to speak to audiences. I've got flown around the world to interview people, literally flown around the world to interview people. I've gotten, flown around the United States to interview people. Holy Toledo, to bring my gear, set up, get super creative, all my mics, lights, stands, iPhones. Oh my gosh. And he just reminded me, I'd completely forgotten 3 years ago, none of this was happening. Under 3 years ago, right? Because we're August 2023 as I record this. So much for evergreen content on this episode. But you get what I'm saying? And I think it was such an amazing moment, because I still can get fixated and focused on the horizon and what I have not achieved yet, or where I not am yet. And I can lose track of enjoying the ride. Like, so much about life is enjoying the moment, enjoying the ride, and not the end game, the elusive end zone, the elusive end line, that horizon, because it's constantly moving and never enough, it can feel like. And so in a flash, in an instant, Jeff reminded me, took me back to those first COVID Zoom calls as we were all fighting, a lot of us fighting, going online to Zoom, where I had no gear. Now when I'm on Zoom, I sound incredible, I look incredible, I've got a great background that people always ask me about. People ask me about my gear. People are like, oh my gosh, you're so natural on the mic. All these things. Now I can literally speak anywhere, at any time, on camera or not. You can put a mic in front of my face and I can riff. You can set me in front of a camera and interview me. Pretty incredible. And all that progress flashed in front of me. I've done virtual summits where I've brought 20 speakers in and interviewed 20 people. And not to toot my own horn, just to be like, holy mackerel, like, look how far I've come and how much fun I've had. I forgot how much fun so much of the stuff is that I'm doing. Like, in that moment that Jeff was reminding me of this, I was like, oh my gosh, I am having so much fun. And this is so amazing. And I've made so much progress. There's that idea of the gap and the gain by Benjamin Hardy. I've spoken about this before, but I'll speak about it again. Like, if we can gauge our progress relative to where we've come from instead of somebody else, and if we can get in the habit of looking at smaller micro gains, like how far we came today, what did we accomplish today, what in the last week, in the last month. It's so powerful versus when we compare ourselves to others and we are constantly looking at that horizon line. And so it was such a great reminder for me of like, oh my gosh, again, I'm just going to say it. I, with what I'm doing, have come so far. And I bet you, with what you're doing, have come so far. So take a minute and think about it. Like, literally think about any projects that you've done, any learnings that you've been trying to do, any things that you've been trying to create. Maybe it could even be problems that you're trying to get through, a divorce, traumatic life situations. Like, just think about where you were a week ago, a month ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And I hope I've caught you at a good time where you're not hurtling into the abyss. But anyway, you get what I'm saying. Like, take a look at how far you've come and get in the habit of looking at the micro wins, the proof of learning, the small proofs of success. And it's funny, I actually wrote at the top of my journal the other day to write down 3 successes, three gains. Look at the gains. Don't focus on the gap between us, ourselves, and others, and the horizon. But look at the gains. So thank you so much, Jeff, for shining that big, bright light on how far I've come. Like, only less than 3 years ago, I had no podcast. I hadn't been flown around the world to interview people. I hadn't been paid to interview people. I didn't have my current membership, my current Influence Army community where, we're helping people go on an influence tour. Oh my gosh, for where I was, for what I've been trying to accomplish, just for me and my horizon, oh my gosh, massive gains. All right, that's it. I'm done. Everybody have a good day. Love to all. Focus on how far you've come.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Table Rush Talk Show. For resources to help you sell your stuff, go to belove.media/resources. That's belove.media/resources. And be sure to subscribe, comment, 5-star, and share. Thank you again for listening.